Imagine moving into what seems like the perfect apartment. Quiet neighborhood, affordable rent, and landlords who smile a little too much when they hand you the keys. For Marcus Williams, a 29-year-old graphic designer from Columbus, Ohio, that dream quickly became a nightmare. Because every night inside that apartment, something stirred. Something that didn't just scratch at the walls. It clawed at his sanity. And one evening, as Marcus prayed desperately for peace, he looked out of his window and saw his landlords burying strange objects in the soil. Objects that would later tie this case to one of the darkest secrets in the city's recent history. This isn't a horror movie. This is a story. And once you hear it, you'll never look at your neighbors or your landlord the same way again. Before we dive in, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community here on Crime Scene Explained. Stories like this are made to keep you up at night, and I want to hear your theories as we unravel Marcus's terrifying experience. What do you think the landlords were burying? Comment below and let's talk about it. Marcus Williams had never been picky about apartments. At 29, he had lived in everything from crumbling studio flats with leaking ceilings to short-term rentals filled with mismatched furniture. He worked from home as a freelance graphic designer, meaning location wasn't as important as price and reliability. But in the summer of 2018, when his old lease ended and he needed a new place fast, Marcus stumbled across a listing that seemed too good to be true. A one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Columbus, affordable rent, utilities included, and the ad even mentioned a quiet, family-owned property. The pictures showed a brick duplex with tidy shrubs, a small backyard, and a driveway that could fit 2 cars. The landlords, Harold and Linda Cooper, were an older couple in their 60s. They had lived in the neighborhood for decades, owned several properties, and ran things themselves. No agencies, no paperwork nightmares. When Marcus met them, he noticed right away how overly friendly they were. Harold, tall with a wide frame and an old-fashioned flat cap, shook his hand with too much pressure. Linda, smaller and round-faced, smiled so wide her lips trembled. They asked about his work, his family, and even his church background, something Marcus thought was odd for a rental meeting. But the price was right, the move-in date was flexible, and the apartment itself looked freshly cleaned. Beige carpet, neutral walls, and that faint smell of lemon cleaner that makes you feel like you're stepping into a brand new life. Marcus signed the lease that same afternoon. What he didn't know was that this lease came with a hidden cost. The first week was unremarkable. Marcus unpacked, set up his workspace in the corner of the living room, and stocked his fridge with frozen dinners. He had a cat, a gray tabby named Oliver, who quickly made the apartment his kingdom, patrolling windowsills, knocking pens off Marcus's desk, and curling into the sunspots that stretched across the carpet in the afternoons. But by the third night, Oliver started acting strange. Instead of curling up at the foot of Marcus's bed, the cat stayed in the hallway, staring at the floor near the entry closet. Sometimes he would hiss at nothing. Other times his back would arch and his tail would puff up like a bottle brush. Marcus tried to laugh it off. Cats were weird, right? They saw shadows, insects, things humans couldn't. But the longer it happened, the less funny it became. Especially when Marcus noticed scratches on the inside of the closet door. Long, jagged, uneven. Too high for Oliver to have made. At first, Marcus thought maybe the previous tenant had a dog, but the scratches looked fresh. The paint around them still flaked. And every night, when Marcus tried to sleep, Oliver would return to that closet and sit there, staring, as if waiting for something to come out. Around this time, Marcus also started noticing strange behavior from Harold and Linda. They lived in the unit next door, the other half of the duplex. Their kitchen window faced his living room, and every morning, without fail, Harold would stand by the window, sipping coffee, just watching. Not openly staring, but glancing in every few minutes like he was checking to make sure Marcus was still there. Linda would come over at odd times, bringing him cookies, asking if the heat worked, wondering if he needed anything at all. Her kindness felt rehearsed, almost mechanical, like she was following a script. The oddest moment came one evening when Marcus took his trash out to the bins near the driveway. Harold was already there, dumping something heavy into his own bin. Marcus nodded hello. Harold didn't speak. He just gave Marcus a stiff smile, then quickly shut the bin lid. The smell that escaped was sharp, earthy, metallic, almost like blood mixed with soil. Marcus froze. But before he could think, Harold patted the bin lid and said, "Just cleaning up the yard, nothing to worry about." Then he walked away. It was the 6th night in the apartment when Marcus awoke at 3:11 a.m. to a sound that made his blood run cold. Scratching. Not Oliver scratching at his litter box, not branches brushing the window. This was deeper, stronger, coming from beneath the floor. Marcus sat up in bed, heart pounding, listening as the sound moved, slow, dragging like claws pulling through wood. Oliver bolted from the bed and darted into the closet, gnawing frantically. The scratching stopped after 5 minutes, but Marcus didn't sleep again that night. On the morning when he mentioned it casually to Linda, she laughed too hard and said, "Old houses make noises. You'll get used to it." But Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the noise wasn't the house. It was something inside it. Here's a quick one. What do you think so far? Was Marcus just experiencing new house jitters, or was there something buried beneath that apartment waiting to claw its way out? Comment your thoughts. I will read every single one. That night, Marcus decided to record the sound. He left his phone on the floor by the bed, recording as he drifted into uneasy sleep. At 3:12 a.m., the scratching began again. Louder, longer, almost angry. When Marcus reviewed the recording the next morning, his heart nearly stopped, because underneath the scratching, faint but undeniable, was a voice, a whisper, and it spoke his name. Marcus replayed the recording 3 times. Each time, the voice seemed clearer, as if it wasn't just in the background, but whispering directly into his ear. Marcus. It wasn't the voice of Harold or Linda. It wasn't anyone he recognized. It sounded hollow, like it was traveling through dirt. Marcus sat frozen in his living room, the phone still in his hand. Oliver, the cat, sat at his feet, ears flat, pupils wide. Every time Marcus replayed the clip, Oliver hissed and bolted into the closet. That closet. The one with the scratches. The one Oliver wouldn't leave alone. By the end of the 2nd week, Oliver's behavior had shifted from nervous to violent. He no longer slept in Marcus's room. Instead, he prowled the hallway at night, growling at the floorboards. Some mornings, Marcus would wake up to find Oliver's food dish overturned, water spilled across the kitchen tile, and tufts of gray fur scattered as though he'd been in a fight. But the strangest part wasn't Oliver's aggression. It was the way he had begun to avoid certain spots in the apartment. He wouldn't walk near the entry closet. He wouldn't step on the square of carpet near the living room window. And he absolutely refused to cross the hallway at night, skirting the edges like something invisible waited in the center. Marcus tried to coax him, even carrying him into those spaces. But each time Oliver panicked, hissing, clawing, twisting free until Marcus had no choice but to let him go. It was as if Oliver could see something Marcus couldn't. One morning, Marcus noticed something new: scratches. Not just in the closet now, but on the walls of the living room. Long, thin marks that hadn't been there the day before. They started near the baseboard and stretched upward, jagged and desperate. Marcus ran his hand over them. The paint felt fresh, the edges sharp. Too precise to be an accident. But the strangest detail? The scratches formed shapes. Not random lines, shapes. Circles, overlapping triangles, and one symbol that looked eerily like an eye. Marcus didn't know what it meant, but the symbols made him sick to his stomach. He tried to scrub them off with a sponge, but the marks seemed burned into the paint, as if the wall itself had been carved. That night, when Marcus turned off the lights, he swore the symbols glowed faintly in the dark. As if the scratches weren't enough, Marcus began having nightmares. Every night, the same sequence. He was standing in the backyard under a black sky. The ground beneath him pulsed like something was breathing just under the soil. Harold and Linda stood at the fence, watching silently. Then the earth cracked open, and black hands clawed upward, grabbing his ankles, dragging him into the dirt. Marcus would jolt awake, drenched in sweat, his sheets twisted around his body like bindings. And each time he woke up, Oliver was there on the nightstand, staring at him, tail whipping back and forth like a metronome. The dreams weren't just disturbing, they were exhausting. After 2 weeks, Marcus felt hollow-eyed, paranoid, and ready to collapse. On a Wednesday night, Marcus decided to investigate the closet. He couldn't ignore Oliver's obsession with it any longer. He pulled everything out: the jackets, the shoes, the old vacuum the landlords had left behind. The closet was empty, except for the scratches on the door and walls. But when Marcus knelt down, he noticed something odd about the floor. The carpet didn't sit flat. In one corner, it bunched upward, as if something lay underneath. Heart racing, Marcus grabbed a box cutter and carefully pulled the carpet back. Beneath it, instead of the expected plywood, he found a square of wood that didn't match the rest of the floor. A hatch. The kind of hatch you could lift open. Marcus froze. He reached for the edge, but Oliver hissed so violently behind him that Marcus jerked his hand back. He covered the hatch again and shoved the carpet into place, trembling. He wasn't ready. Not yet. The breaking point came 3 nights later. Marcus woke of Dan around 3 a.m., but this time not to scratching, to voices, whispering, chanting. He got up, pulled back the blinds, and peered into the backyard. What he saw nearly made him drop to the floor. Harold and Linda were kneeling in the dirt near the fence line. Between them was a shallow hole, freshly dug. They were burying something wrapped in cloth. Linda muttered as Harold pressed the soil over the bundle. It wasn't English. It was guttural, rhythmic, almost like a prayer, but not to any god Marcus knew. And then, just as Marcus leaned closer, Linda's head snapped up, her eyes locked directly with his window. Marcus ducked so fast he banged his head against the wall. His breath caught in his chest as he crawled to the floor. Seconds later, a knock echoed through the duplex wall. 3 sharp bangs. Not at his door, at the wall.
Harold's voice followed, low and deliberate. "Mind your own business, Marcus." The next morning, Marcus's hatch was no longer covered. The carpet had been pulled back, the wooden square stood slightly open, as if someone or something had already gone inside. And Oliver the cat was gone.
Marcus tore through the apartment in a panic, calling Oliver's name. "Oliver! Ollie, come on, buddy!" No answer. No jingling collar, no soft paws patting against the linoleum. Just silence. The hatch in the closet sat slightly ajar, as if daring Marcus to look inside. He couldn't. Not yet. His mind spun with possibilities. Maybe Oliver had slipped outside. Maybe the landlords had grabbed him. Maybe... No. He couldn't finish that thought. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. Every creak of the duplex felt amplified. The silence was too thick, as if the air itself was waiting. Then, around 2:45 a.m., it came. A noise from the closet. Not scratching this time. Breathing. Slow, ragged, wet breathing. Coming from beneath the hatch. Marcus sat up in bed, heart pounding, staring at the closet door. The sound grew louder. Inhale, exhale, raspy and deliberate. And then, as if sensing his fear, the breathing stopped. Moments later, Marcus's phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. Stop digging. The next morning, Marcus decided to involve the police. He couldn't explain everything. What would he even say? My cat is missing, my landlords bury things in the yard, and something is breathing under my closet. Instead, he framed it simply. Suspicious activity, noises, trespassing. 2 officers arrived, but they seemed uninterested from the start. They glanced at the scratches on the wall, the slightly lifted carpet, and shrugged. Looks like an old unit, probably just settling noises. As for your cat, maybe he slipped out when you weren't looking. Marcus tried to insist, but their tone made it clear they thought he was overreacting. Before leaving, one officer muttered, "You're new here, right? Don't get too curious about people's business in this neighborhood. It'll make your life harder." Marcus shut the door, fists clenched. Not only were the police dismissive, but they sounded warned. The very next day, Marcus found something waiting on his porch. A dead bird, perfectly placed, wings splayed open like a grotesque display. No note, no explanation, just the offering. Oliver was still missing. Marcus buried the bird himself, but the message was clear. Someone was watching. Someone wanted him scared. That night, another message appeared under his door, typed in block letters. Curiosity killed more than the cat. I want you to ponder on this. If this was you, would you stay in that apartment, or would you break your lease and run? Drop your answers in the comments, because I know some of you would never step foot in that place again. The nightmares returned, darker than before. Marcus dreamed of the hatch opening on its own, pale, mud-covered hands pulling themselves out of the hole. The hands didn't grab him this time. They carried Oliver.
The cat's eyes glowed red, his body limp as the hands dragged him back into the earth. Marcus woke screaming, clawing at his sheets, sweat soaking his pillow. Except this time, when he opened his eyes, there was dirt on his hands, real dirt, and the closet door stood wide open. The following morning, Marcus confronted Harold and Linda. "I know what you're doing. I saw you bury something in the yard. My cat's missing, and someone's been in my apartment." Harold's eyes narrowed. Linda forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're stressed, Marcus. City life can do that to newcomers. Maybe this isn't the right place for you." Linda added softly, "Cats wander. Apartments creak. Don't let your imagination run away with you." But as Marcus turned to leave, Harold leaned closer and muttered, low enough for only Marcus to hear, "Some doors shouldn't be opened." That night, Marcus couldn't resist. He pulled the carpet back again, pried open the hatch, and shined his flashlight inside. A narrow tunnel descended beneath the duplex. The walls weren't stone or wood. They were dirt clawed smooth, as though dug by hand. Marcus gagged at the smell, mold, rot, and something metallic, like blood. He lowered the flashlight, and that's when he saw it. Tufts of gray fur. Oliver's fur. Marcus dropped the light in shock. The beam rolled across the dirt tunnel, illuminating something even worse. Bones. Not animal bones, human bones, partially buried, lined in crude patterns along the tunnel wall. The beam flickered, and in that instant, Marcus swore he saw eyes glinting in the darkness. He slammed the hatch shut and shoved the carpet back into place, trembling uncontrollably. The next morning, Marcus's porch held another gift. Not a bird this time. Oliver's collar, still attached to a strip of bloody fur. And pinned to it was a note. "Next, it's you." What do you think Marcus should do now? Call the police again? Confront the landlords? Or dig deeper into that tunnel? Comment below with your theories, because things are about to get even darker.
Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, staring at Oliver's bloody collar. His hand shook so badly he almost dropped it. That note, "Next, it's you," felt less like a warning and more like a promise. The duplex walls seemed to close in. The air was thicker, harder to breathe. He felt eyes on him constantly, through the windows, the vents, even the cracks in the floorboards. Every sound, pipes groaning, floorboards creaking, distant cars made him flinch. But what haunted him most was the silence of the hatch. No scratching, no breathing, nothing. As if whatever had been beneath his floor was waiting. That night, Marcus tried to drown his fear with headphones and music, anything to block out the silence. But even through the music, he heard it, whispering. At first, faint and intelligible, then clearer, layering over the beat in his headphones. Marcus. He tore them off, heart pounding. The apartment was empty, but the whispering didn't stop. It was coming from below, seeping up through the hatch. Dozens of voices, low and desperate, begging, pleading. Some were too faint to make out, but a few words froze Marcus where he stood. "Help us. Don't let them bury me. Join us." Marcus slammed his hands over his ears, but the voices only grew louder, echoing inside his skull. Then, silence. and a knock at the door. When Marcus opened the door, Harold stood there, alone. "Couldn't sleep?" Harold asked, his face unreadable. Marcus tried to slam the door, but Harold shoved it open with surprising strength. He stepped inside, uninvited, eyes darting toward the closet. "You've been poking around, looking where you shouldn't." Marcus's pulse quickened. "Where's my cat? What's under the floor?" Harold ignored the questions. Instead, he muttered something strange, like a chant. Marcus caught only fragments. "The earth remembers. The debt must be paid." Marcus shouted for him to leave, but Harold didn't flinch. His eyes glazed over, as though he was somewhere else entirely. And then, without warning, Harold snapped out of it. He looked Marcus dead in the eye and whispered, "You'll understand soon." Then he turned and walked out, leaving Marcus frozen. The following night, Marcus couldn't resist spying again. At 3 a.m., he crept outside and hid behind the fence. There they were, Harold and Linda, kneeling by the garden. But this time, Marcus saw everything. Not just shovels, not just dirt. Candles, symbols carved into the soil. Linda held a bundle wrapped in cloth, something about the size of a child. She laid it gently in the pit, while Harold murmured that same chant Marcus had heard in his apartment. When they covered it with dirt, Marcus swore he saw the earth move on its own, as if something beneath was pulling the bundle down. Marcus clamped his hand over his mouth to keep from screaming. Let me ask, at this point, would you risk staying another night, or would you pack your bags and run for your life? Let me know in the comments, because what happens next makes running almost impossible. When Marcus returned to his apartment, he found his front door wide open. He knew he had locked it. Inside, everything was disturbed. Not stolen, disturbed. Drawers pulled out, clothes thrown across the floor, the fridge door left hanging open. But the most terrifying part was on the wall of his living room. Scratched deep into the plaster were words carved with something sharp. Stay. Beneath it, handprints. Small, muddy handprints. Children's. Marcus backed away, shaking until his legs hit the couch. That's when he noticed the hatch was open. Not cracked, not scratched, wide open. And from it, the faint sound of crying. Children crying. Something inside Marcus snapped. Fear mixed with rage, grief, and desperation for answers. He grabbed his phone, switched on the flashlight, and descended into the hatch. The tunnel was tighter than he expected, barely wide enough to crawl. Dirt crumbled under his hands, cold and damp. The crying grew louder. After what felt like forever, the tunnel opened into a small underground chamber, and Marcus froze. Bones. Piles of bones. Small skulls, tiny rib cages, the remains of dozens, maybe hundreds of children, arranged in neat, ritualistic circles around a pit in the center of the chamber. The pit pulsed. Yes, pulsed, as though alive, breathing, the earth itself expanding and contracting like lungs. Marcus stumbled backwards, gagging. His light landed on something near the edge of the pit, Oliver's body. His cat lay motionless, eyes clouded, fur matted with blood. But when Marcus reached for him, Oliver snapped up. His head snapped up, and a guttural growl poured from his throat. His eyes glowed, burning bright red. Marcus dropped the flashlight, plunging the chamber into darkness. And in that blackness, dozens of small, cold hands reached out from the pit, grabbing his arms, his legs, his throat. Marcus screamed, thrashing against the grip of skeletal fingers, but the voices surrounded him again, whispering in unison, "Stay with us." Then came a sound above him, footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps crossing his apartment floor. The hatch slammed shut, and Marcus was trapped in the dark. Do you think Marcus will ever make it out of that chamber alive?
Or is he destined to join the voices in the pit? Comment your theories and stay tuned, because that's when the truth about the landlords finally comes to light.
Marcus's lungs burned as the stale air of the underground chamber closed around him. The small hands tugged and clawed, pulling him closer to the pit's edge. He kicked violently, freeing himself for only seconds at a time. His flashlight lay several feet away, its beam flickering against the wall, just enough to reveal the horror. Skeletal figures, no taller than children, crawling from the earth like broken dolls. Their empty sockets glowed faintly as though lit from within. And all the while, the whispers, "Join us. He promised. You belong here." Marcus forced his way toward the flashlight, grabbed it, and swung the beam wildly. For a moment, the figures recoiled as though the light pained them. Seizing the chance, Marcus scrambled back toward the tunnel, clawing upward with every ounce of strength. He burst through the hatch, slamming it shut behind him. His chest heaved as he collapsed against the wall, drenched in sweat and shaking uncontrollably. But just as he thought he was safe, he realized he wasn't alone. Harold stood in the corner of the living room, half shrouded in shadow. His face was calm, almost pitying. "You weren't supposed to see that. It's better when they don't see," Harold said softly. Marcus staggered to his feet, rage flooding his veins. "What the hell is that? What are you doing down there?" Harold didn't answer. Instead, he muttered, "Debts must be fed. That's the way it's always been." Marcus grabbed the nearest thing he could, a lamp, and raised it like a weapon. "Stay away from me!" But Harold didn't move. He only said, in a voice so chilling it froze Marcus in place, "You're already part of it." Marcus bolted past him, sprinting out the door and into the cold night. He didn't stop until he reached the all-night gas station 2 blocks away. Inside, under fluorescent lights and the bored gaze of the cashier, Marcus finally felt like he could breathe again. That's when he made the call to the police. 2 officers arrived at the duplex an hour later. Marcus, still trembling, led them inside and showed them the hatch. But when the officers pried it open, nothing. No chamber, no bones, no pit. Just packed earth, as if the tunnel had never existed. Marcus swore, pleaded, begged them to dig deeper, but the officers exchanged looks. One muttered, "We'll file a report," while the other whispered, "Another crackhead tenant." They left Marcus standing there, devastated. But as they walked away, Marcus caught something in Harold's eyes through the window: satisfaction. Marcus refused to give up. He headed to the local library, digging through archives of old newspapers. And what he found chilled him to the bone. The duplex wasn't just a duplex. Decades earlier, the land had belonged to an orphanage, one that mysteriously burned down in the late 1960s. But it wasn't just fire. Survivors claimed the caretakers practiced strange rituals involving the children. Authorities called it mass hysteria, but the case files Marcus uncovered told a darker story. Dozens of missing children, never found. Multiple reports of shallow graves near the property. Whispers of the caretakers offering sacrifices to keep the land alive. And the names of the caretakers: Harold and Linda Green. the exact names of his landlords. If I may ask, if you discovered your landlords were tied to a decades-old child sacrifice case, would you confront them or run? Comment below, because Marcus was about to do both. Fueled by terror and anger, Marcus returned to the duplex. He didn't care if Harold killed him, he needed the truth. He barged into their unit, catching Harold and Linda at the kitchen table. Both turned toward him with eerie calmness. "You found the files," Linda said flatly, not even pretending to deny it. Marcus's voice broke. "Those kids, all those bones, you killed them?" Linda smiled sadly. "We didn't kill them, Marcus. We gave them purpose. The land demanded it. Without it, the land eats us instead." Harold added, "You think you're here by accident? The land chose you." Marcus's stomach turned. He backed away toward the door, but Harold stood. "Don't fight it. You'll see. Soon." The next day, Marcus contacted a private investigator, Detective Raymond Holt, a grizzled ex-cop with a reputation for digging where police refused. At first skeptical, Holt agreed to look into it when Marcus showed him the old orphanage files. Within a week, Holt found something shocking. Harold and Linda weren't just old, they were impossibly old. Arrest records from the 1960s showed them looking exactly the same as they did now. Same faces, same names. Holt muttered, "Either they've got grandkids with the same names, or they haven't aged in 50 years. That night, Holt and Marcus returned to the duplex with shovels and gear. They dug where Marcus had seen the burials. Hours passed, nothing but dirt. Until Holt's shovel hit wood. A small coffin. Inside, bones. Small ones, just like Marcus had seen in the chamber. Before they could react, a sound echoed across the yard, chanting. They turned to see Harold and Linda standing at the edge of the garden, holding candles, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. And behind them, figures. Small, childlike silhouettes, crawling from the soil. Holt drew his gun, but Marcus knew bullets wouldn't stop what he was seeing. The children moved closer, hollow eyes fixed on him. Linda raised her candle high and declared, "Tonight, the land takes what it's owed." The ground beneath Marcus split open. A pit yawned wide, black and endless. And hands, dozens of them, reached up to drag him down. Here is another question. Do you think Marcus and Detective Holt can survive what comes next, or has the land already claimed them? Share your theories in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.
The earth beneath Marcus's feet split wider, yawning like a mouth ready to swallow him whole. The skeletal hands clawed upward, their grip cold and unrelenting. Holt fired his gun, but the bullets passed through the childlike figures as if they were smoke. "Marcus, move!" Holt bellowed, yanking him away from the pit's edge. But the ground kept giving way. The soil crumbled under their boots, pulling them closer. Harold and Linda's voices rose in unison, chanting words that didn't sound human anymore. Their faces twisted, skin stretched tight, eyes glowing brighter than ever. Linda's voice cut through the chaos. "The land takes what it's owed, one way or another." Holt shoved Marcus toward the fence line. "Run!" Marcus stumbled, but the skeletal children swarmed, surrounding them in a tightening circle. Their whispers returned, louder than ever, vibrating inside Marcus's skull. "Stay with us. Join us. Forever." One of the figures reached for his throat. Marcus grabbed a rock and smashed it against the apparition. To his shock, it worked. The figure shrieked and dissolved into dust. "They're not untouchable," Marcus shouted. Holt swung his shovel, dispersing 2 more. Then we fight. The yard erupted into chaos. Marcus and Holt striking wildly, skeletal figures shrieking, soil flying, candles flickering. But for every figure that fell, more crawled from the ground. And then Marcus heard it, a faint voice beneath the whispers. Familiar. Oliver's meow. Marcus turned. At the pit's edge stood Oliver. His fur was matted, but his eyes glowed softly, not with malice this time, but with warmth. Oliver meowed again, then darted toward Harold and Linda, weaving between their legs. The chanting faltered as Harold stumbled, nearly dropping his candle. Linda shrieked, "Stop him!" But Oliver leapt, claws out, knocking the candle from Linda's hand. It tumbled into the open pit, igniting the soil in a sudden blaze of blue fire. The skeletal figures froze, shrieking as the flames spread. The pit convulsed like a living thing, trying to close. Marcus seized the moment. He grabbed Linda's arm, screaming, "What did you do to them?" Linda's eyes, wide with fury, met his. "We gave them life. We gave them a home. Without us, they're nothing." But Marcus saw it in her eyes. Fear. Detective Holt forced Harold to the ground, pressing the shovel against his throat. "You've been feeding children to this land for 50 years. Why?" Harold's voice rasped. "It was never our choice. We inherited the debt. Every 50 years, the land demands souls, or it takes ours instead." Marcus recoiled. "So you murdered children to save yourselves?" Harold's expression twisted. "You don't understand. The land is alive. It's older than this town, older than us all. It can't be destroyed. It only trades." Holt growled. "Then maybe it's time you pay your own debt." The blue fire spread faster, consuming the skeletal figures one by one. Their whispers turned to screams, then silence. Linda tried to run, but Marcus blocked her path. For the first time, she looked fragile, aging rapidly, her face collapsing into wrinkles, her hair graying before her eyes. "No," she whispered, "it wasn't supposed to be me." Harold reached for her, but his skin began to wither too, crumbling like ash. The land had chosen. Marcus and Holt staggered back as both landlords collapsed, their bodies disintegrating into dust that the soil greedily swallowed. The pit roared once more, then slammed shut with a deafening crack. Silence. The garden was still. The pit was gone. The skeletal children had vanished. Marcus sank to his knees, trembling. Oliver rubbed against his leg, purring softly, as if nothing had happened. Holt scanned the yard, his face grim. "It's over, at least until now." Marcus whispered, "What happens if the land wants more?" Holt didn't answer. He didn't have to. The unease in his eyes said everything. Weeks later, Marcus moved out. He found a small apartment across town, far from the duplex. He wanted nothing more than to forget. But forgetting was not so easy, because every night, just before sleep, he heard faint whispers through the walls. "Stay with us." And one morning, when he opened his closet door, he froze. The floorboards had shifted, just enough to reveal a small, square hatch. Do you think Marcus escaped the curse, or is it already following him to his new home? Was Harold telling the truth about the land being alive, or is something even darker at play? Share your theories in the comments below. I'll be reading them all. And if you made it this far, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss our next chilling case. Trust me, it only gets darker from here.